Let me ask you something. How many leads have you generated over the past year that never even turned into a conversation? Here's the hard truth. Most advisors don't really have a traffic problem. They have a follow-up problem. In today's Quick Wins episode of the Financial Advisor Marketing Playbook, I'll break down two things that make or break your pipeline. Drip campaigns that nurture without annoying, and cold emails that actually start conversations instead of getting deleted. If you want more meetings without more ad spend, this episode is for you. Let's dive in.
This is the Financial Advisor Marketing Playbook, a show for financial advisors who want to explore the topic of client acquisition and business growth. Your host is Mark Mersman, Chief Marketing Officer at USA Financial. He is an investment advisor representative of securities offered through USA Financial Securities, member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor.
Welcome to another episode of the Playbook. Today I want to talk about drip campaigns that nurture and not annoy, and we'll get into cold emails. And here's the truth. Most advisors don't really have a lead problem. They have a follow-up problem. If you think about, just look at your database right now, you've probably got dozens, if not hundreds of opportunities of people that are not your clients already that could become clients, yet you are busy trying to get the next lead into your marketing funnel when perhaps there's an opportunity for you to cultivate those existing opportunities that you've already perhaps paid for or nurtured in some way or gotten introduced to. So, for example, if somebody downloads your guide and never hears from you again, that's not marketing. That's simply leakage, right? And the thing to understand is that there is a fine line and a strong difference between annoying and proper nurturing. And really the difference is intentional sequencing. So let's talk a little bit about this, because advisors either don't follow up enough or they follow up in a way that feels transactional. And really that's not what any of us want to feel like when we're, being cultivated. And think about it. All of us go through this in some way, shape, or form in our everyday lives, from businesses trying to get us and earn us as a customer. The goal is not more emails. In some cases, it might be, because if you're not sending anything. But the real goal is fostering momentum and building trust. And today we'll cover two things: drip sequences that build trust. And, another topic that I wanted to work into this conversation is cold emails that open conversations without feeling spammy, because there's a lot of tools out there now that are fostering the opportunity for you to leverage cold emails. And there's certainly some right ways and wrong ways to do that. So we're going to talk about that today. But let's start with drip campaigns that are intentional at how they seek to nurture a prospect. But I want to start with talking about kind of the big problem in terms of why most email drips fail. The first is they're educational newsletters, not journeys. So think about that. Educational newsletter number 47 is not exactly all that compelling, and they're not a journey that you're taking that prospect through. Most of the time, these drip sequences, they lack any emotional progression. They'll ask for the meeting too soon. And, unfortunately, they feel very automated. And in many cases, in most cases, that's because they are. And if you really think about, hey, could I spend a few hours cultivating a meaningful drip sequence for prospects that really comes from my heart, not the heart of pick your online marketing automation tool and AI generated tool, but something that really feels like you. Most drip campaigns, there's a market update that nobody asked for. There's this, hey, I'm still trying to book you. They lack the emotional progression. I mean, think about the most common drip sequence is, oh, you requested this guide. Here it is. And email number 2 is book a call. Email number 3 is book a call. And email number 4 is Are you still there? There's no empathy with that sequence, right? There's no story. There's no evolution. So I want to talk about kind of reframing the purpose of the drip and the nurture campaigns. Drip campaigns are not about selling. They're about building familiarity, demonstrating your competence, your knowledge, without, putting your entire resume on display. They're about reducing fear and increasing comfort, right? We have to think about these things as natural humans and consumers. So let's talk a little around kind of a 5-stage sequence that I would encourage you to think about working into your drip sequence. So we're going to talk about kind of a very simple 5-step nurture sequence framework. And the first stage is relief. Okay. Each of these stages is going to have a primary goal or purpose behind the email itself. So the first stage, sent immediately. If they requested a guide, they're obviously going to get the guide. The goal is to reduce anxiety. So deliver what was promised. We want to thank them. And most importantly with this, we want to normalize where they are, because assuming you're targeting the right audience with this and they've requested something, we want to normalize where they are. So reassure them, hey, you are not behind. In fact, most people don't feel fully confident about insert whatever it is that your guide is hoping to provide some relief around, and make it really short and sweet. The point of that email is simply relief, reduce anxiety. We're not selling immediately. We're not asking for that, hey, come into my office type of moment yet. We're just trying to set the stage that you're delivering what you promised, you're thanking them, and you're normalizing where they are. The second one is empathy. This one will be sent, 3 to 5 days later. I think a good rule of thumb with any of these sequences is somewhere in that 5 to 7 range in terms of length of time in between. The second stage is empathy, and the goal is really to show your understanding. So I would consider sharing a short story about someone in a similar situation. Presumably if they're downloading a guide about retirement income planning or taxes or you name it, there's going to be some nugget inside of there, or there was some sort of compelling reason that they decided to request that. Therefore, we want to show understanding, and we want to do that through a short story about someone in a similar situation. The goal is to try to normalize confusion because, hey, it's understandable. You might be confused. We want to mirror their situation. And again, no selling. So a simple example for this might be, most people feel this way. In fact, I recently spoke with a couple who felt overwhelmed by conflicting advice, or who had a tax challenge that they didn't even realize how big it was. And you're not going to go into tons and tons of detail about the situation, but you want to share a couple of points that consumer, that person that's on the other end of that email is going to look at it and say, I can relate to that. So think about that. Empathy is kind of that second stage there. The third stage with our third email, again, 5 to 7 days later, is to start to introduce your authority on the matter. Now, in theory, there's been some subliminal messaging around your authority because you are the one that provided the guide. But now we want to introduce your thinking framework, introduce your process for how you help people. Share one simple framework. Keep it simple, not overwhelming. Something like, our process helps our clients focus on 3 very simple things. Boom, reducing taxes. Boom, reducing waste. Whatever it is, try to boil down what your process, especially when what's the guide that they downloaded, or what was it that got them, maybe they came from a seminar event and the seminar event was on taxes, or maybe it was on legacy planning. Whatever it was, that was their area of interest. So we want to play that through with your drip and nurture sequence. So very simple, 3 simple things, put it out there, boom, boom, boom. This is what our process helps clients to focus on. Again, now you're starting to demonstrate authority. You're also starting to demonstrate to them that, hey, you do actually have a process and you're not just winging this. The fourth email is going to be focused on vision. What we want to do is, the goal of it is to kind of paint the emotional outcome and help them imagine clarity. So you want to think about painting what the after picture looks like. Since we know that they likely have some pain, we want to communicate, hey, this is where you were before or where you currently are, but here's what the after could look like. Communicate what a transformation looks like to them, or clients that were in similar situations. And an example could be, what retirement feels like when income is more predictable and you're able to spend more freely. The clients that have gone through our process feel more confident in terms of how they approach their day-to-day, or how they approach the decisions that they're going to make about what their retirement life is going to be like. Again, paint kind of that imagine moment, right? Help them imagine what clarity can look like, because now you're starting to draw them into, wow, this is what a relationship with this advisor might look like. And then that fifth email is really now the invitation. Now we're going to open the door gently. We're going to have a soft call to action. Hey, we've shared a few ideas with you, some thoughts around it. If you'd like to talk through your situation, we can schedule a short clarity call. Make that call to action not overly salesy, but enough that you're opening the door gently. And I highly discourage you from doing any of the urgency gimmicks, if you will. So, if you call by tomorrow, we'll waive the cost of that meeting. Everybody's seeing through that. And candidly, you don't want to be viewed as that person. You're coming from a position of authority and trust, and not desperation and gimmicks. So some really simple drip campaign rules to be thinking about. One idea per email. Don't overwhelm them. Try to keep this short and concise, 150 to 400 words max on that email. Make sure it's in a conversational tone. I would really avoid putting too many links in there. You can certainly put a link here or there, but don't pepper them with 8 links that you're going to send them all over God's creation to explore and research. Certainly if you want to include a link to your site, whether it's a specific blog post, or maybe you're looking at some social proof that you want to point them to, you can certainly do some of that, but don't put a bunch of links in there. Space them 5 to 7 days apart, and really understand that stories are much better than statistics and financial jargon, because there's really not much more that will annoy a prospect than too many stats. You start citing all these different things, all these different stats, whether you're trying to scare them or impress them with your knowledge too much, and their eyes are going to glaze over and they're done. The other thing that will annoy prospects with drip sequence is hard closes too early. And the daily emails, don't do it every single day. You're going to quickly get put on the list that you don't want to be on, or unsubscribed. And I would avoid the long market commentary. The truth of the matter is, the second they see the long market commentary, the only person that might be interested in reading that is the do-it-yourself investor that you probably don't want as a client. So that market commentary for the average, for the average Joe, the average Jane in America, is going to be absolutely meaningless, is going to get hit delete, and you'll get pushed aside. Here's the thing to remember with this. If every email feels like a pitch, people will unsubscribe. But if every email feels like insight, people will lean into that. Which brings me now to cold emails. Slightly different than the traditional drip campaign, where they, downloaded a guide, or maybe they came to an event, or you were introduced to them through somebody. A cold email is obviously somebody that you don't know, and you're trying to kind of bust through to see if you can't get an appointment. Now, obviously, your conversion rates on these are going to be much lower than somebody that you met at a live event, if you will. But so let's think a little bit about reframing what a cold email or the intent behind a cold email is. The first is you have to understand the cold email is not about closing, and it's about opening, right? It's about opening a door. So, we're trying to open a loop, not close a sale here. So mistakes that most advisors make with these, and this isn't just advisors, this is true. I mean, I'm sure you all get cold emails. I know I probably get 5 to 10 a day if I'm being honest. And candidly, I have some of these cold emails have led to me doing business simply because of how the email got structured. The first is, too long. You want to avoid being too formal. Again, being too credential heavy, just like we talked about earlier. This is not the time and place for you to put your resume on display. If they're intrigued by your message, they'll find some of that stuff on your website as they're vetting you out. We don't want it to be sales driven. Cold emails should really feel like a thoughtful note and not per se a campaign. So inside of every good cold email, the core structure to it, and this is going to sound like a lot in one email, but I'll try to read. I'll share an example for you in terms of how you can bring this all together in a fairly short email. The first is relevance. Demonstrate and show why it is that you're reaching out. This is kind of like I work with several business owners in the area. So you're demonstrating, at least connecting the dots as to why you're reaching out. Then step 2 in that email structure is insight. Share something useful for them. Something that a simple one-liner or a bullet point or two that is going to be helpful for that particular audience. So hopefully if you're doing this in some sort of larger campaign type of structure, you're drilling down into, hey, I've got 50 business owners that fit this niche. And so I can, confidently say all of them are going to have some of the same pain points. And so we want to share something useful there. And then the third part of the cold email structure will be curiosity, and ask a non-threatening question. Hey, I don't know if you've looked into this recently, or I'm curious. The words "I'm curious," you can get away with asking just about anything after those 2 words. So work that into that email structure. And then the fourth part of it is a low pressure, soft close. Are you open to a short conversation? Some really simple cold email principles to kind of live by here. With cold email, you want to even be shorter than what some of the nurture sequence we were just talking about a bit ago. You want to keep it under 125, 150 words if you can. No attachments. Attachments, number 1, people are going to be really skeptical to open them from a stranger. And number 2, it's only going to increase your likelihood that you get caught in spam filters. I would avoid calendar links in your first email. Again, we're not trying to be overly salesy. If we are going to put something out there, it's going to be really soft and low pressure. No heavy formatting. This is a big one. For those of us that get cold email all the time, we can quickly tell through heavy formatting, oh my goodness, this was clearly automated. It was clearly written by some sort of bot, and it makes my eyes spin. And perhaps the last and most important one here is to write like a human. I totally get you might use AI or other tools to help you draft some cold email sequences. Just make sure you're going through and writing it, rewriting it, revisiting it. Don't just accept that first flash that you get from whatever AI tool you're using, write it like a human. I'd encourage you to maybe write it out yourself first, or take the output and then redraft it. Here's kind of an example of how this might look. Subject line might be quick question. And we'll talk about subject lines in perhaps a different episode, but there's certainly an art to the subject line. But the note might be, hey, hi, John. I work with several business owners, and we were in Grand Rapids, Michigan, who happen to be within 5 to 10 years of selling their company. One thing that surprises many of them is how exposed they are to taxes in the year of a sale, even when they've planned ahead. I'm curious, have you had a second set of eyes on your exit tax strategy recently? If it'd be helpful, I'd be open to a short conversation. Then my signature. That's it. Very simple. Now, we'll talk about how many of these and what's kind of the structure to this, but I want to talk first about the behavioral psychology behind cold email. Curiosity bias is going to drive response. So that will tell you that you don't need to put everything you know about a specific topic in a single email. We want to invoke some curiosity out of the recipient. Specificity is going to build credibility. This means understand who it is that you are emailing and be very specific about communicating with them and demonstrating that you have some specific knowledge that would benefit them to potentially meet with you. Personalization will increase reciprocity. Okay, we know that. And that email, the length, when we talked earlier, here's the thing. Short emails will absolutely positively reduce the cognitive load. So understand, don't try to get everything you can into one email. That's part of the purpose of having multiple emails that you might put out to that person. Cold email should feel like a nudge and not a pitch. I think that's really important to be thinking about that. I think too many cold emails, we're trying to get our entire pitch deck, if you will, into the email when really we're just trying to get a nudge. We're just trying to invoke enough curiosity that they say, maybe there's something here for me to look into. So here, I guess, kind of a closing thought around some of this stuff. Maybe some quick wins that you can get. First, I'd encourage you to rewrite your first drip email to focus on relief and not selling. So if you have a drip sequence, think about it from that perspective. Rewrite that first one. Look at it and say, hey, am I touching on relief? If you're using cold emails, shorten them by 50%. Just go through whatever it is that you got. And if you're over 150 words, just cut the thing in half. Find a way to trim that down using that framework I shared with you. Remove your calendar link from the first email. And, as you look at both nurture and the cold side of things, add one story to your sequence. Think about some of the people that you've helped that are in a very similar situation to the people that you're trying to connect with, and add a story to them. Personalize. You don't need to use specific names, but add a story so that there's an implied social proof that comes with that you can demonstrate, I've helped people just like you. Need you to understand, follow-up is not annoying. That's the thing. I think a lot of advisors, they miss the boat on the sweet spot because they're either reluctant to do any sort of follow-up in drip sequences, or they go overboard the other way and they're hitting these people's inboxes every single day. Follow-up should not be annoying. Intentional sequences is what will win the day. And done right, a good nurture campaign builds trust before the meeting ever happens. And so I would encourage you to think about leveraging other collateral that you already have, whether you have videos, whether you have blogs, whether you have guides. Use some of that to continue to build trust with your nurturing. Don't just completely rely on some of the canned campaigns that exist out there. And there's nothing wrong with them. I'm not trying to put them down. But if you really want to amp up your effectiveness on your drip sequences, think about being a little more human. Think about the things that you would respond to. I would challenge you, if you've ever interacted or engaged with somebody who sent you a cold email or the nurture emails, what was it? Look at the emails that caused you to open it, read it, and maybe take a click and look at their website. What was it about that email that really caught your attention? And start to mimic that, because I guarantee you they follow a very similar framework and structure to what we just laid out. If you like this content, if it's helpful, I would certainly ask you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow me on whatever podcast player is your preference, and give us a like and a follow. If that helps us with the algorithm gods, and hopefully will help you as we continue to deliver this type of content. That's it for now. Hope you have a good one. Take care.
This information is for licensed financial professionals only and is not intended for use in soliciting sales from the public. The views expressed represent the opinions of the presenter or their featured guest, not necessarily those of USA Financial or its affiliated subsidiaries. Industry references are generic and are not intended to represent actions or beliefs of any individual or entity. Content is only presented to illustrate general principles, beliefs, or ideas and should not be construed as legal or regulatory advice. Trademark and copyright protected. USA Financial and Affiliates.